Now, the US was to be used as a big battering ram to bring the rest of the world into this global system, the planned economy, the planned society, from who should get born, who should not get born, and the social Darwinistic theory that they brought into it. And Rockefeller, of course, was all on board with that, the social Darwinism idea, where he himself certainly had his ideas of how the people should be run, who should order their lives, how to order their lives. And eugenics, of course, is a big part of it too. The Rockefellers funded the Cold Springs Harbor experiments and so on in eugenics, and started the award system for the monthly Americans Family of the Month awards way back in the 20s, I think it was. So it's interesting to see that every group you see that you belong to, if you belong to anything at all, whether it's a religious group or whatever, it was taken over an awful long time ago. In fact, the history of the US is fascinating when it comes to religion, because you get the standard authorized version, cleaned up, of course. That's the authorized version of all the untidy stuff they don't want you to know. There's a lot of groups came into the US, many groups who were subversive. They weren't just getting persecuted because of religion or something. It's because they were subversive and revolutionary in their thinking. Many of them came in with Marxist ideas, in fact, in the late 1800s, and were very, very powerful, very vocal in the early 1900s, 1920s, especially in places like New York. Mass meetings in the streets, lots of old newspapers out at the time, their speeches, and they weren't the only group. Even before that, you had communities coming in that joined certain and created certain Christian sects, or guise of Christian sects, in fact, so that it was all for social change, particular types of change. And when you look at them all, it's always the same kind of change they're after. Once again, social Darwinistic management of the public from birth to death, who should live, who should die, would they need you down the road to work in their system, just like George Bernard Shaw said. He said, you have to come to us eventually to see if we should let you live or die. Why should we keep you alive? In other words, what use are you to us? That was the purpose of it all. You had to have purpose in order to be fed and kept alive, or even to be born. And we're getting to that stage now, the completion of it all. Because, you see, it's intergenerational brainwashing of acceptance by pushing the envelope, always pushing the envelope a little bit more, until not just when it comes to the sexual thing, and this is one part of it, not just the parents will sit with the child now and let certain things go on comedy shows that perhaps they shouldn't, because the parents themselves have been contaminated in their turn, and their parents before them as well. So you can have 3 or 4 generations sitting on the same couch watching television, and they've all been contaminated till everything on television is pretty gross, and same repetitive type of grossness as well, which also dehumanizes the public into another animal. You laugh at that because you're laughing at yourselves as animals, you see. And with animals, you can do what you want. And then you have all the economic specialists telling you about, this great science of economics, which no one apparently understands, because we keep getting plundered twice a century by the big bankers, you see. And they tell you how they're going to cut back on everything, including treatment for healthcare, etc., which is well underway in Britain. That's a flagship for the US, because the US actually copied the British system according to the Rand Corporation, which was employed to do the surveys on the best system for them to adopt, according to what they wanted to do. And they said the British system is the one they'd adopt. So everything works together. Democracy doesn't ever come into the picture on anything, actually, because the public never have a say in all the big important events that are planned for their lifetimes. And when you understand and you read so many of the big boys involved in pushing all of this stuff, you find you're just living through a script. And it's awfully boring. Terribly boring. So why should you get all hot and bothered when they fulfill a certain part of it? After all, if you're expecting it, and they told you about it years ago, expect it to happen, because that's what you're living through. It's a planned agenda with timetables for certain implementation of different parts of it, you see. Now, I'm sure all of you have friends out there who parrot the stuff from television, and they come up with certain topics or even arguments which they've adopted from the experts, that class of experts that they give you to believe in. And they'll say, well, I guess they have to ration healthcare and it's so expensive and we're going to austerity. But they never complain about the cost of wars. I mean, wars go on all the time for the big boys. The army, in fact, the whole country is just their private business, really. We're all part of their private enterprise. But they use your money to pay for all the wars, which they use for personal gain, naturally, since they have to be in control of all resources across the world. It's personal gain for them. And they're awfully good at propaganda. They're doing it all to save you from disaster. And once they have the resources in those countries, it's not to... You see, I used to work, the people would say, well, we need the oil, So now you're starting to rationalize plunder. But of course, it's not going to you. The oil is then sold to other countries like China. That's where the big boys arranged to sell it to when they took over Iraq. But the big boys are in there, the Shell and BP and all the rest of them, because Tony Blair came out afterwards that he'd had meetings with all these companies before the Iraqi war where they agreed to divvy it up amongst those boys. The taxpayer would fund all the operations for war, pay for the cleanup, and even build them new refineries. It's awfully nice of us, isn't it? Well, that's democracy, you see. So try not to allow yourself to be panicked by the constant hype and repetition of things that they're telling you to be outraged about. After all, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing. What are you going to do? Please stop putting missiles around Russia and scaring the public with retaliation. Please stop putting color revolutions into Ukraine or the next country after that, or the whole bunch of countries you're doing it to at the same time. Please stop it. Thank you very much. So what are you going to do? Get ulcers, griping over it? You see, we don't have democracy, as I say. You'll never hear the politicians bring up NAFTA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership agreements, all these free trade deals, which is not free trade at all. It's selected trade for big corporations and elimination of any competition. That's what it is. And we have to pay those third world countries, the emerging nations, just like we're still paying China, by the way, to rise up to first world status. We pay them to do that. We build their hospitals once we sign these agreements. We give them all this cash. It's a one-way street. Because it's a big plan and it's nothing to do with benefiting you. I can remember when they pushed the EU for complete integration, and they gave the folk the choice to vote yes or no. And they said to every country, the same hype, massive marketing campaigns with the top marketing companies, advertising companies, to brainwash the public and terrify them. Oh, if you don't join, you'll be left behind. If you do join, there'll be jobs in utopia. Well, bingo. Where are they now in Europe? You see, you're always getting lied to because there's always a different agenda behind it all. Very, very clever agenda with lots of groups all working in this pyramid structure and taking command from the guy at the top. That's how it works. But meanwhile, you get one or two targets to pick and yell at, and what does it do? Nothing at all. If it wasn't that guy, they'd pick it, they'd use someone else to do it. So these guys are just front men in a sense, who know their role, just like a politician or top politicians know their role. And their role is to be unpopular and to have tomatoes thrown at them. And then they give you another target after that. It's a very simple technique. Very old too, isn't it? Very, very old, boring technique. So you're living through an agenda. Don't get outraged over things because outrage doesn't win anything. It never has anything changed. Oh, I'm outraged. Stop that. Thank you. It doesn't work. So you have to get other methods of doing it. And again, too, you got to say to yourself, why do those who have the power and the following who are pushing outrage not get something organized to really combat something in a sphere with enough political clout to do something to actually they really can't ignore you? It doesn't happen. You ever asked yourself why it doesn't happen? It's up to you to figure that out. And again, to all remember what Bernays said, Edward Bernays. He said in his own writings, if you want to take something over, even monopolize something, whatever it happens to be, and you're starting from scratch, don't, he said, try to start things literally from scratch. Look for existing organizations. If you don't have one, you create them, but you pretend you're not associated with them. And then the people will follow them because they'll become the leaders, you see. But existing organizations you would use to the maximum, including all the churches. They're fantastic for that. And he said you have to go and approach the leaders of these people. It doesn't matter about the followers, or as George Orwell called them, the pros. The pros don't count, he said. They just they just train seals who are the yay crowd. Rah, 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 for the leaders. So that's how they manage the general population. That's why they have all these NGOs, non-governmental organizations out there, all paid for very handsomely for the leaders, by the way, not for the followers, but leaders, from the big foundations. And the foundations have an incredible history, very well organized, coordinated on a massive scale, often thought to be communist, in fact, according to the Rees Commission from the 1950s, because their goals under social Darwinism are the same. They are the same because they want a planned society, birth to death, monitoring by government at every stage of your life, every day of your life, in fact, and school to work, of course, where they simply test you for a few abilities very young, and they'll say he'll be a good plumber, a good electrician, whatever, and that's all you'll be trained in. You don't need geography, history, or anything else. That's the plan for the future. And it's already being implemented too. And as I say, you have no say in any of it at all, because what you're fighting is a complete system with literally maybe thousands of think tanks, thousands of them, full-time, very intelligently selected guys in it, think tanks, lots of them who have nothing to do but work on each simple problem of their big agenda and how to get the public and to coerce and manipulate and nudge the public along with the big plan in every possible aspect of life. So each one is specialized in a specific part of it, and many think tanks are working on the second or third or fourth or fifth stage after the present, as the present one's still working on the present, if you understand what I'm saying. That's what you're up against. How can you possibly combat that by being outraged with things that are happening this very moment, which will be gone tomorrow or the next week or whatever, as you turn your attention onto the next crisis, real or possible or fake, whatever.